AITA for not disclosing my true genetics to my fiancé? I, 28F, have been with my fiancé, 29M, for almost 3 years now. When I was 22, I was having issues with a deviated septum. While I was in the process of consulting doctors and planning for surgery to correct it, I had a few friends tell me that it may be possible to also get cosmetic correction for very little out of pocket since the septoplasty would be covered by insurance. Sure enough, I was connected with a surgeon that agreed to it, and I moved forward with a very affordable septorhinoplasty. My nose was definitely an insecurity before surgery, but it wasn't a crazy change either. It looks very natural and has a nice slope and straight tip now, where before it had a bump and hooked down slightly. I don't think I would have pursued a nose job had the opportunity not presented itself, but it made sense given the circumstances, and honestly, I love my nose now. I was never actively hiding the fact I got surgery. In fact, I made jokes about it, and when I was recovering I had taken a bunch of pictures and was sending silly Snapchats to my friends. However, the humor wore off after a few months, and it just didn't come up anymore. By the time I met my fiancé, it was old news. It never came up, and it felt so minuscule that I didn't think to tell him about it. Well, I was going through old photos the other day to clear some storage space on my phone. He was glancing over my shoulder and saw one of the post-op pics that I had probably sent to one of my friends as a joke way back when. He asked about it, and I told him it was from my septorhinoplasty. He goes, "Like a nose job?" I chuckled and explained. He was livid. Said it was deceiving, I deliberately avoided disclosing my true genetics, and that it gave him a false idea of what our kids would look like. I was shocked. I told him it wasn't that deep, and that the change wasn't even that drastic, especially considering he's seen photos of me from before and never even noticed the difference. He says he doesn't trust me now and is rethinking the engagement on the premise of genetics in future kids. I'm so confused as I didn't think it was a big deal, and it genuinely just never came up. Is this really the deception he's saying it is? AITA for not telling him before? NTA? Run. He says he's rethinking the engagement on the premise of genetics in future kids. He's admitting he only sees you as an egg donor and incubator, not a whole person. Count yourself lucky that he showed his true colors now, and get out. Geneticist here. His comment is problematic on several levels, his misunderstanding of how genes work being just one of them. Run fast. It's not. He is YIA overreacting. He's putting it under some guise of worried about your children's genetics, but there's obviously nothing guaranteeing what your children would look like anyways. And even if your children were to have horribly awful noses, who the fuck cares? NTA. Oh sweetie, I rarely comment here, but as a mom I can't stay quiet. Please do not marry this man. You are very lucky that he has shown his true self to you, and it's ugly. A man who loves you for you would have said they are glad you were able to have surgery to fix the deviated septum, and that they would think you are beautiful with both the old nose and the new nose. You deserve so much better than him. NTA, you had surgery to correct a medical issue, and during it, they made modifications so minor he never even realized the difference between old photos and current you. You aren't Princess Vespa, and there was no lie. He always had access to pre-op photos that show the real you. If he's rethinking the engagement over this, spare him the skull sweat and hand him back the ring, because is that the level of assholery you want to deal with for the rest of your life? AITA for making my chronically late friend miss her seminar? My friend 25F is constantly late for everything. Be it work-related or fun activities, she will always be at least 15 to 20 minutes late. She does not have a car, and so oftentimes I 25M will pick her up from her house. I work at a university, and she is a PhD student there, and her place is along the way for me. Last time I offered her a ride to work, she ended up being 20 minutes late after I've already arrived at her place. Because of that, I ended up being late for work. She is always very apologetic about her lateness, but never changes. This week she was supposed to give a seminar at the university, which is a crucial part of her PhD program. She asked me if I could give her a ride to work that day. I told her sure, but that I was picking her up at 8 a.m. and she must be there exactly at 8 a.m. and not a minute later. She chuckled, but I told her I wasn't joking, and she promised that she will be there. The morning of her seminar, I drove to her place and got there at 7:55 and texted her that I was here, and she told me would be out in just a minute. At 8 o'clock, there was no indication that she would come out, and she didn't text anything, so at 8:01, I drove off. At around 8:20, she called me asking me where I was. I told her I was at work and that I wasn't joking when I told her that she had to be ready right that minute. She started screaming and crying over the phone and told me that she was having a hard time that morning, couldn't be ready right at 8 a.m. She then begged me to come back to pick up her, as her seminar is at 9 a.m. and she needed to be at the school before then. I could have done it quick enough to pick her up and drop her off without affecting my work, but I decided I didn't want to do that and told her that I won't. She was crying and hyperventilating at that point and said she'd promised to never be late for anything else again, and re-emphasized that this seminar was crucial for her PhD and that she absolutely cannot miss it without severe consequence. I responded "oh well" and hung up. I then went about my day at work normally. I feel I could have went back and picked her up in this scenario, since it wouldn't have been detrimental to me, and at the same time this was something very important for her. On the other hand, I feel like this should be a wake-up call for her chronic lateness. NTA. You warned her. She also had 40 minutes to make other arrangements even after all her procrastination. Could you have been kinder? Yes. Could you have reminded her about your time restrictions? Yes. Could you have given her a final notice with an "I'm going to drive away at 8 o'clock"? Yes. Is it rude to have to be continuously late? Hell yes. Is she an adult? Yes. Is it your problem to manage her time? No. Still NTA. Doing something like this is the only way some people will ever learn. It's sad that Op's friend had so little concern for her friend's time when he was trying to help her. Maybe next time she has to be somewhere she'll be more respectful of other people's time. When you said you left at 8:01 I was thinking but when she didn't call you until 8:20 I laughed and thought oh no, definitely NTA. Your friend needs to learn that punctuality in the professional world is important. Also, her chronic lateness should not be affecting you getting to work on time. NTA. Why didn't she just call an Uber or taxi? If it was that important, she had other options available to her. AITA for refusing to get rid of poison ivy at the edge of my yard. A family with young children recently moved into the house next door. The border between our yards, mostly on my side, has a ton of poison ivy. I'm extremely sensitive to it, so I haven't tried to control it except when it starts to grow too much into my yard. Even when I do remove it, I have to suit up and wash everything thoroughly, and I still somehow end up with a rash. One of the parents came to my door last week to ask me to remove the poison ivy because their kids have been getting rashes when they play in that part of the yard. I said that I couldn't do that because of my sensitivity, but that they could just get it removed on their side, and as long as their kids stayed in their own yard it wouldn't be an issue. They said that even if they did, that it would grow back into their yard from my side, and that I could pay a company to remove it if I wouldn't do it myself. I said that I would only agree to that if they paid for all of it. They refused and said they would be looking into local laws about nuisance plants. We're not on speaking terms anymore. Am I really the asshole here? It's their problem, so why should I have to pay for it? They could just teach their kids to avoid poison ivy like I do. I could understand it if I had planted it intentionally. But poison ivy is a native plant that was here before I was, and it's an important food source for bees and birds. Quite frankly, I'm grateful for it because it's been keeping their loud kids away from my yard, who were really annoying me whenever I was out in the garden. TLDR. My neighbors asked me to remove poison ivy on my property line because their kids were getting rashes, and I refused because I didn't want to pay to remove it or risk removing it myself. It sounds like the poison ivy border between your properties is a nuisance to both you and your neighbors, and you are all making this situation needlessly complicated. Why not just hire a company to remove the plant and then split the cost? Edit. Oh, I see that the real reason you're letting this poisonous plant continue to grow and encroach on your neighbor's property is so that the kids will not be able to play in that section of their own yard. You are intentionally keeping a poisonous plant around that is harmful to both you and your neighbors, so they can't access that part of their property. How completely selfish. AITA. AITA offering to split the cost strikes me as a very reasonable compromise. Digging in makes you a non-neighbor. Celebrating it as a poison child deterrent even more so. Your neighbors will figure out the laws and act accordingly, and will always hate your guts. It's so nice having friendly neighbors who help each out, but you chose poison. Also, OP just gave neighbors full ammunition to win a nuisance lawsuit, in which case the plant will be forcibly removed and the costs will fall fully on OP. In the majority of the USA, the following is the law on private nuisances that specifically cites poison ivy. A private nuisance is anything a person does or maintains that leads to someone else's loss of use or enjoyment of a property without trespassing. This may include poisonous plants, since they can cause harm to others. If your neighbor is particularly adamant about keeping his or her noxious plants, filing a lawsuit could bring law enforcement out to force the neighbor to remove the plant or relocate it away from your property. AITA OP. And by not being reasonable, you've likely landed yourself more expenses. I don't understand why you keep the poison ivy that you are so sensitive to. It's a weed and a nuisance and an allergen. You can plant other things for the little creatures, maybe even plant a hedge to keep the neighbors out that doesn't cause rashes and require moonsuits to get near. AITA. AITA. Geez, why not just do it, because it's literally the neighborly thing to do? I too had poison ivy growing at the edge of my yard, growing through under a fence into my neighbor's yard. I texted my neighbor and asked her to meet me at the fence so I could show her where it was so her son wouldn't run into before I could kill it. And then I took care of it and told her to let me know if she saw any more growing. Why is it hard to just be a decent person?